This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lady Colombia, for inviting Christian Aid. Y un abrazo fuerte a todos los compañeros y compañeras que han venido desde Colombia hoy. Normally, when we talk about mining, when we talk about the UN guiding principles for business and human rights, when people are asked about what they deal with, many people think about stuff like displacement, land rights, environment, employment, and health, etc. But I'm going to focus my presentation today dealing about taxation and what relationship taxation has with mining and human rights, and also sustainable development. We talked about that a little bit before lunch with Ambassador Mauricio Rodriguez, but I would like to talk a bit more. And I would like to start just reminding that General Comment 14 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights talk about the three main duties of states in relation to human rights, which are the duty to respect, to protect and fulfill. The Iraqi framework talks for sure about the state's responsibility to protect human rights, and also talks about business' responsibility to respect human rights. But actually the framework does not mention at all explicitly the duty to fulfill. I'm not an expert in human rights, but I think, or I thought it was also important to remind everyone that the duty to fulfill requires states to adopt appropriate legislative, administrative, budgetary, judicial, and other measures towards the full realization of human rights. And this obligation to fulfill contains obligations to facilitate, provide, and promote. So as I was saying before, this state's duty to fulfill is not so clear, or we can say, or we could say that probably is not so clear considered in the Iraqi framework. However, I would say it is implicitly considered, and I would just make 2 points here. First, the UN guiding principles refer to internationally recognized human rights, which the guidelines state should be understood at a minimum as those expressed in the International Bill of Human Rights, which includes then the Universal Declaration and the two international covenants. And it also says, under Principle 11, that businesses, or business enterprises, should not undermine states' abilities to meet their own human rights obligations. So in relation to that, I'm going to talk about two taxation phenomena. I'm going to talk about tax evasion, which hasn't been considered so well or so much today, and also I'm going to talk again about tax incentives, which we talked about this morning. So remembering these 2 points, and also the three main duties of states in relation to human rights, we need to consider now that when the states need to accomplish those duties or to comply with those duties, there are a number of rights which very clearly require the state to have financial resources. And there are a lot of them, but if we talk about, for instance, Article 3, it talks about the right to security, and that's something expensive from a state point of view. If we talk about Article 23, that would be the right to work, or the right to a standard of living, which is adequate for health and well-being, or the right to education. And actually, in Article 22, it mentions the right of everyone to realization for everyone in terms of their economic, social, and cultural rights. And it mentions specifically that this should be in accordance with the organization and resources of each state. So the main question here is, what happens when corporations dodge taxes to the government? Can we say in that situation that corporations are undermining the state's ability to meet their human rights obligations? And therefore, can we say, when corporations dodge taxes, that they are also causing an adverse human rights impact? And again, I want to refer to where I started. When we talk about these issues, we talk about land, health, employment, etc. But do we also talk about taxation as I think we should be talking? And let me just talk about the phenomenon of trade mispricing. Trade mispricing basically means those practices that some corporations engage with with the ultimate goal of moving profits from one jurisdiction to another. Basically, from jurisdictions where the tax rates are higher to jurisdictions where the tax rates are lower. And they do that normally through over-invoicing imports or under-invoicing exports. So, for instance, a mining corporation in Colombia might decide to sell the copper they extract to a subsidiary in Switzerland, for instance, at a much lower cost than what the market states. And by doing so, what they achieve is that they reduce their profits in Colombia and they increase their profits in Switzerland. And by doing that, they are saving the tax costs because they are paying less taxes in Colombia, and because Switzerland is a tax haven with lower tax rates, they are not paying taxes over there. So Christian Aid estimated that Colombia, between the years 2005 and 2007, might have lost as much as $100 million as a result of trade mispricing only by oil and coal corporations. So, as I was saying before, these $100 million which have been lost to the Colombian government means that this government has had less resources to fulfill, to meet the human rights obligations. So my statement here is that when corporations dodge taxes, they are causing as well an adverse human rights impact. And based on that, corporations should, and also building on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, corporations should be expected to adopt fair tax policies, and I'll just talk in a minute about what do I mean with that. They should include tax practices as a key risk area in their due diligence systems, according to Principle 18. They should be preventing and mitigating those negative impacts, according to Principles 13 and 15, and they should also seek remedy, which basically means paying your fair share of taxes in that country. Very quickly, when we talk about fair taxation policies, I'm not going to just elaborate a lot on that, but let me just be clear about what we might mean. And we mean, for instance, principles like substance, which means that companies' tax payments should reflect the location of their business activities. And they should not be paying taxes in countries where actually they are not operating because they are just present there for tax reasons. For instance, as is often the case in tax havens. So they should not be misusing tax havens or opaque company structures just for reducing their tax bill. The third one, which relates to tax incentives, power. A company should not use its superior bargaining power to obtain unfair conditions in the tax incentives they are obtaining from the government. Transparency, which also is important for our discussions today. Corporations should be transparent about its tax policy. It should be understandable, timely, and it should be properly communicated. Accountability. Companies should at all times comply with national laws of jurisdictions. Financial reporting. A company should disclose its financial reporting for all countries. So we should be knowing in which countries a company is operated, under what name of the subsidiaries, what is the turnover they are making in that country, what's the profits they are obtaining, what are the taxes they are paying, and other additional data, for instance, number of employees. And governance. A company's board is responsible for the company's tax strategy, and then should be playing a key role in that sense. Let's now look a little bit more on the issue of tax incentives. This morning, the ambassador was saying that the profits or taxes paid by the corporations was significant. He was also making reference to the competition to attract foreign direct investment. Well, this is taken by the report, from the report. So it's saying that in 2007, the tax exemptions to coal and mining in Colombia reached 53% of the income tax payable, and in 2009, that figure raised to 90%. Maybe the ambassador is right when he was saying that there is tax competition and there are efforts from different governments in order to attract foreign direct investment. What I would just say, the ambassador, I think he left the room, is that one of the solutions to that is regional cooperation. The reaction from governments to the competition to attract foreign direct investment is only leading to a decrease in the welfare of populations. And what is required here is cooperation at regional levels among governments, so that we don't see this race to the bottom, which implies governments progressively reducing the corporate income tax rates, and governments also increasing the amount of tax incentives they have to attract to the corporations to come to their countries. This is not just a Colombian phenomenon, so here we have other figures for other countries, and you can say that between 2002-2009, the cost of tax expenditures reached something between 43% of total revenues in Costa Rica, 75% of in Guatemala, 44% in Honduras, so that's pretty much a globalized phenomenon. And the important thing here also is to consider whether these tax incentives are being effective, and when I say effective, I'm meaning to consider if those tax incentives are really producing the desired behavior from corporations, or just thinking, for instance, does this mean that without those tax incentives, these companies wouldn't have come to our country? And sometimes I just doubt so. Efficient, meaning that it needs to be clear that the benefits of that we are obtaining because of those tax incentives are higher than the costs. And in this cost, we need to consider all the costs we've been talking about today. Transparent. Are these tax incentives known to this civil society, so that also society can hold the government accountable? And I was just talking the lunch break with Alex, and he was saying that so far they don't have the information about the tax incentives granted by the Colombian government to corporations operating in the region. How much time left I have? 2 minutes. So all those key issues obviously matter in terms of sustainable development. We have this Colombian National Development Plan 2010-2014, and if Colombians are going really to take benefit in this generation and in future generations, it's very, very important that the government takes care of this behavior of tax dodging by some corporations, also these corporations abusing bargaining power, and also how to make sure that those tax incentives that they are using are effective and efficient. I'm going to skip this graphs I had here, but they are showing really that the way taxation systems are designed today in many LAC countries is just regressive, and it's just contributing to the increase of inequality in the region. Let me just show this one maybe. This refers to the corporate income tax gap. So if you look here, you would say that for different countries in the region, the amount, the difference between the potential of the tax revenues from corporations and what governments are actually getting is as big as 4, 2, 4, 4, 5, etc. of the GDP. So it's huge. Corporations, and I'm just my last slide before the conclusions or recommendations. Corporations, when talking about sustainability, they should also ask themselves the question of if they are operating or they are working just to maximize short-term profits, or if their real goal is to optimize profits in the long term. Because they have to realize that when corporations dodge taxes, what they are also compromising is the state's capacity to, for instance, improve infrastructures, to improve the skills of the labor force, factors, among others, that contributes to the future competitiveness and productivity of the country, and also to the long-term profits. And also they have to consider that when they engage in this kind of abusive tax practices, that they are undertaking a risk in terms of reputation, and also, if things go bad, in terms of cash flow, because they might be expected to pay fines for the taxes they have been evading. Some are recommendations, in just 1 minute, to businesses. So because taxation is fundamental to fulfilling human rights, corporations again should adopt fair tax policies. They should know and show their policy commitment. They should include tax practices as a key risk area and due diligence systems, and they should be seeking to redress and to put remedy to the violations. And governments, they should be moving from tax competition that the ambassador was talking about before to regional tax cooperation. They should be reviewing the tax incentives to ensure that they are effective and efficient. They should improve the transparency and accountability of those tax incentives. They should take measures to fight trade mispricing I talked about before, and they can do that by strengthening transfer pricing legislation and also just requiring corporations to tell us in each country where they operate how much taxes they are paying, and then they should be showing to the citizens how the resources they are obtaining from the mining or whatever resources are, how they are using them to benefit current and future generations. Thank you very much.